So after the gold rush, the Chinese were oftentimes pushed out of working in the mines, especially if there were large populations of white folks around. So when that happened, and that also coincided with kind of the larger scale industrialization of mining, from gold pan mining to larger industrial styles of mining that required shooting lots of water at high speeds at the side of a mountain and then going through the rocks that come out of that. That required a lot of capital and pushed a lot of people out of the solo mining gig. So when the Chinese were pushed out of that, they came into cities and they started doing all kinds of different jobs. Some of them did stay rural, worked on ranches and farms, but others moved to areas like Eureka and established a Chinatown. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the work they did. So over here, this case kind of shows a couple items that represent work that the Chinese workers did. So one of those, of course, was laundry work. And these irons, this one, and that one, some of them can weigh about 12 pounds. And how these would work is that you'd take your iron, which is made of iron, cast iron, you'd put it on your stove, you'd let it heat up, and then you'd have another one also heating up. And once one of them was heated up, you'd pick it up and you'd iron your clothes real quick. And then as it cooled down, you put it back on the stove, pick up the other one, and keep ironing. But if you've ever used cast iron, you know that it gets kind of dirty sometimes. So you got to also be careful to not get that on the clothes, especially clean clothes that you're ironing. And these irons can weigh about 12 pounds, so you can imagine working in a really warm, humid laundry for 12 hours a day was kind of a common work day, depending on the work you were doing. Could even be longer work days. You can imagine how that would be kind of awful. And this was work that a lot of the white population didn't really want to do. It was hard work, it didn't pay a lot, and so the Chinese people picked it up. And there were a lot of white people that didn't really like that situation, I guess. A lot of people framed it as the Chinese are taking our jobs, and I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. So we also got a mop bucket here. There we go, that's a little bit clearer of an image. They also worked as house cleaners and domestic servants, that kind of thing. We also have a long-handled axe here, and we have a drag saw, which goes all the way there. So we did have Chinese loggers that worked around here. Like the railroad work, they oftentimes got the most difficult jobs for the lowest pay. And then there's also this kind of really long drill-looking thing. So this is a tree drill, and this is one of the tools in the local logging industry that kind of surprises a lot of people. What happened is early on, it was really hard to take down larger trees. There just wasn't the technology to do so. You have these drag saws, but before those were widely available, it might be kind of hard to take down a tree. So what would happen is sometimes it was after the tree was already on the ground. They'd drill into the side of it with this tree drill, and they'd stick some dynamite in it and blow it up, and that would break it up into smaller pieces that were a little bit more manageable. And as technology improved, those kind of became less of a tool that was used. This is a pack saddle. So there were Chinese workers who worked on pack trains, taking supplies from the coast over to the mines, the Trinity mines, and other ones. So here's a pack saddle from that. So usually these would have kind of I guess it would be like a leather or a burlap bag that sits over the top of it, and then you'd tie items to that. And that would distribute the weight along the animal and be sure that it doesn't rub against the animal in a way that's uncomfortable or hurtful for the animal because they had to travel very far to get these supplies to where they needed to go. And a lot of people made money working as pack train suppliers and general store operators. A lot of times people say those were the guys that actually ended up making a killing on the gold rush, not the miners themselves. So we have a couple of household items here. We got a feather duster, and we got a crock, and we have a silent butler. So these are some of the tools that Chinese workers might have used working as household workers. And then up here we have a shoulder yoke, which the lights are kind of weird to see here. So this is an example of one of those, a very similar technology to the shoulder pole. Here's that picture again with the guy with the baskets. So that's kind of a little bit of an introduction to some of the work the Chinese were doing here in Eureka and Arcata and different areas around the county.